There's a moment when someone hurts you, a word, an action, a betrayal, and everything inside you wants to lash out, explain, or demand understanding. But there is a different way, a path that doesn't give him the satisfaction of your pain or the clarity of your predictable reaction. The power lies not in retaliation, but in subtlety, in reclaiming your center before responding. Confusing someone who seeks to wound you is not about games or cruelty. It is about reclaiming control over your own energy, your own emotions, your own presence. When you respond with calm instead of anger, with silence instead of desperation, and with self-possession instead of reaction, you disrupt his expectations. You become unpredictable, not for manipulation, but as a natural consequence of being grounded in yourself. In that space, you are untouchable, and your presence alone commands respect. When someone hurts you, the first and most crucial step is to regain your center. This is not about preparing a response or plotting a reaction. It is about returning to yourself, to the calm, grounded space within that allows clarity to emerge. Pain, betrayal, or disrespect can create a turbulence inside, a storm of anger, confusion, and fear that clouds judgment and weakens resolve. In those moments, most people instinctively react, lashing out or attempting to defend themselves, but such reactions often only reinforce the dynamic of hurt and control. To regain your center is to step back from the immediate wave of emotion, to observe it without being swept away. It is the act of remembering that your sense of self, your balance, and your energy are yours alone, and they cannot be dictated by the actions or words of another. Regaining your center begins with awareness. You must first recognize the impact that the hurt has had on you, not to dwell in it, but to acknowledge it honestly. Anger, sadness, disappointment, or shock are all valid responses to being hurt, and allowing yourself to feel them is essential. Suppressing emotion does not equal strength, it equals avoidance, which leaves unresolved energy festering beneath the surface. Awareness is the act of naming your experience, understanding how it has affected your body, mind, and heart, and choosing not to let it control your behavior. By stepping into this awareness, you regain a measure of power over the situation because you are no longer operating unconsciously or reflexively. Once you are aware, the next step is to cultivate a state of calm within yourself. This is not about pretending that everything is fine or minimizing the pain you feel. It is about consciously creating a space where emotion does not overwhelm reason. Breath becomes a tool. Deliberate, measured breathing slows the mind, releases tension, and reconnects you to your body. Grounding practices, feeling your feet on the floor, noticing your posture, observing the sensations in your hands, bring your awareness fully into the present moment. These simple but profound acts remind you that your body and mind are yours to command, even when someone else's actions have tried to destabilize them. Calm is a form of power. It disorients the expectation that you will react predictably, and it preserves your energy for intentional action rather than emotional exhaustion. Regaining your center also involves reclaiming perspective. Hurt often narrows vision, making the situation feel larger, more personal, or more damaging than it objectively is. Stepping back mentally allows you to see the event not as an attack on your entire being, but as a moment in which someone else acted in a way that reflects their choices, limitations, or ignorance. It is not a reflection of your worth. This distinction is essential because it frees you from the trap of internalizing the hurt. By separating the action from your identity, you maintain sovereignty over your emotions. You no longer carry the weight of someone else's behavior, and you prevent their actions from dictating your self-perception or inner equilibrium. Another aspect of regaining your center is reconnecting with your intentions and values. Ask yourself, who do I want to be in this moment? How do I want to show up for myself and for the world? When hurt, it is easy to lose alignment with your principles, reacting impulsively in ways that later feel regrettable or disempowering. By reconnecting with your core values, you ensure that every response, whether expressed, withheld, or transformed, is consistent with your integrity. This alignment creates a natural form of confusion for the person who sought to destabilize you. They anticipate reaction fueled by chaos, but instead they encounter calm, composure, and self-possession, qualities they cannot manipulate, control, or predict. Finally, regaining your center is an act of reclaiming your energy. When someone hurts you, they attempt to divert, drain, or disturb your energy for their own ends. By grounding yourself, cultivating calm, and reconnecting with your values, you reclaim that energy. You stop giving it away in reactive behavior, resentment, or attempts at explanation. Instead, it remains within you, available for intentional expression, creativity, and growth. This internal reclamation is what makes the act of confusing someone who has hurt you so effective. It is not about deception or cruelty. It is about demonstrating that their attempt to destabilize you has failed. Your presence, grounded and centered, becomes an unshakable force, an implicit statement that you are the master of your own emotional and mental landscape. Regaining your center, therefore, is both a shield and a sword. It shields you from being manipulated, drained, or diminished by someone else's hurtful actions. It equips you with clarity, composure, and intentionality, allowing you to respond in ways that are aligned with your highest self rather than your immediate reaction. It is the foundation upon which all other strategies, the power of silence, deliberate unpredictability, and focused self-growth are built. Without first returning to your center, any attempt to confuse, disarm, or redirect someone who has hurt you risks being reactive rather than powerful. True strength begins within, in the quiet space of awareness, calm, and grounded self-possession. When someone hurts you, the instinct to react immediately is strong. Anger, betrayal, or disappointment can ignite a visceral response, pushing you toward retaliation, justification, or confrontation. But reacting impulsively rarely yields clarity or power. It simply amplifies the chaos, reinforces the other person's control, and often deepens the hurt. The true strength lies in responding rather than reacting, choosing deliberate, conscious action over instinctive emotional discharge. Responding requires a pause, a mindful space between the stimulus of hurt and the action you take, where awareness and intention guide your behavior. It is in this space that you reclaim authority over your emotions, demonstrating that while someone else may attempt to destabilize you, they cannot dictate your choices, your demeanor, or your energy. This is the foundation of a subtle, disarming power that confuses those who seek to provoke. Responding rather than reacting begins with self-observation. When hurt occurs, the first step is to notice the immediate surge of emotion without judgment or suppression. Anger, shock, or sadness may arise, and instead of acting on them instantly, you observe them as signals rather than commands. This observation is not detachment from feeling, it is mastery of it. By acknowledging the emotion without surrendering to it, you create a buffer, a pause that allows rational thought, ethical consideration, and strategic awareness to emerge. This is the space in which response, rather than reaction, is born. Reaction is reflexive and often predictable, but response is deliberate and aligned with your principles, values, and long-term interests. Another crucial element of responding is emotional regulation. Hurt often triggers a cascade of physiological and psychological responses: racing heart, shallow breathing, tension, and intrusive thoughts. By consciously regulating your emotional state, you prevent these reactions from dictating your behavior. Techniques such as controlled breathing, grounding exercises, or simple pauses before speaking or acting enable you to maintain composure. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing your feelings or pretending the hurt does not exist. It means acknowledging the emotion, processing it internally, and then choosing a course of action that is intentional, constructive, and aligned with your self-respect. This ability to remain calm and measured in the face of provocation is often disorienting to the person who seeks to hurt you because it denies them the satisfaction of seeing you unravel. Responding also requires clarity of purpose. Every action or word that follows the hurt should be guided by intention rather than impulse. Ask yourself, what do I hope to achieve? Am I seeking justice, understanding, or closure? Or am I simply trying to vent anger or assert dominance? When your response is intentional, it carries weight and integrity. It communicates strength without aggression, self-possession without cruelty. The confusion it produces in the person who hurt you arises naturally because they anticipate predictable reactions, anger, pleading, or defensiveness, but encounter a presence that is controlled, purposeful, and unflappable. This clarity of purpose ensures that your energy is invested in meaningful action rather than dissipated in fruitless emotional reaction. Language and tone become critical tools in responding. Choosing words deliberately, maintaining a calm tone, and avoiding inflammatory language creates an effect that is both measured and impactful. Silence can also be a potent form of response, conveying composure and self-control without the need for explanation. When someone attempts to provoke a reaction, a calm, thoughtful response, or even deliberate silence denies them control, making their efforts to destabilize you ineffective. This does not mean you ignore the situation or feign indifference. It means that your engagement is intentional, measured, and guided by your own standards rather than their provocations. Your responses become a reflection of your inner strength and self-possession, not a mirror of their behavior. An essential aspect of responding rather than reacting is the ability to maintain perspective. Hurtful actions often trigger a sense of urgency, making the moment feel disproportionate to its objective significance. By stepping back and assessing the situation with perspective, you prevent the escalation of conflict and the clouding of judgment. Responding with perspective allows you to evaluate whether the issue requires confrontation, communication, or detachment, rather than automatic retaliation. This approach is disarming to someone who expects a predictable, emotionally charged reaction, because it demonstrates their actions do not dictate your emotional or strategic state. Finally, responding empowers you to direct the trajectory of the interaction. When you react impulsively, the other person often controls the narrative, driving escalation or tension. When you respond with awareness and intention, you reclaim control, shaping outcomes in alignment with your values and priorities. This form of deliberate engagement is subtle but profoundly effective, confusing the person who sought to hurt you because it interrupts their expectations and asserts your autonomy. Response is an act of mastery. It transforms hurt into clarity, chaos into composure, and manipulation into opportunity for self-possession. Responding rather than reacting is therefore both a practice and a mindset. It is the conscious choice to reclaim authority over your emotions, to act from deliberation rather than impulse, and to maintain integrity in the face of provocation. It transforms vulnerability into power, unpredictability into strategy, and confusion into a natural consequence of your strength. In choosing response over reaction, you demonstrate that hurt may be attempted, but control over yourself and your energy remains entirely yours. When someone hurts you, one of the most disorienting and powerful tools at your disposal is silence. Silence is not passive, it is deliberate, intentional, and far more potent than words in many situations. When confronted with pain, the instinct is often to explain, defend, or retaliate, but these reactions can feed the very dynamic that caused the hurt. Silence, on the other hand, creates space, a pause that allows both you and the other person to recalibrate. It signals that you are present, aware, and in control, yet unshaken by their attempt to provoke a response. In its quietude lies an unexpected authority, a calm, impenetrable presence that cannot be anticipated or manipulated. This is why silence, wielded consciously, becomes a tool of subtle confusion for someone who seeks to hurt or unsettle you. It interrupts their expectations, leaving them unsure how to read, respond, or regain control over the situation. The power of silence begins with self-possession. To remain silent in the face of hurt, you must first be grounded within yourself, aware of your emotions, and centered in your presence. Without this internal stability, silence can easily become avoidance, repression, or passivity, which diminishes its potency. When rooted in self-possession, silence is an act of mastery. You are not withholding words out of fear or indecision. You are choosing not to give your energy to chaos, anger, or manipulation. The act of staying quiet becomes a declaration that you are not defined by someone else's attempt to provoke, hurt, or unsettle you. This deliberate withholding of reaction communicates strength in a way that words often cannot. Silence also serves as a mirror for the other person. When someone tries to hurt you, they often anticipate a predictable response: anger, pleading, defensiveness, or explanation. Silence disrupts this expectation. Without the fuel of your reaction, their energy becomes unanchored, their attempt to control or manipulate falters, and their own behavior becomes more conspicuous. This quiet reflection can be confusing to someone who thrives on reaction, because they are forced to confront the consequences of their actions without the immediate gratification of your emotional display. In a subtle, almost imperceptible way, your silence transforms the dynamic, making the instigator question their assumptions, intentions, and even the efficacy of their behavior. Another dimension of silence is its capacity to cultivate clarity. In moments of hurt, words often flow from raw emotion rather than thoughtful reflection, creating responses that may later be regretted. By choosing silence, you allow yourself time to process the experience, observe your feelings, and consider your intentions. This pause ensures that when you eventually engage, it is with deliberation rather than reflex, integrity rather than defensiveness. Silence becomes not a void, but a space for internal organization, emotional regulation, and strategic awareness. It protects your energy while simultaneously giving your mind the clarity needed to navigate the situation with wisdom and composure. Silence also communicates boundaries without aggression. It is a form of nonverbal assertion that signals your unwillingness to be drawn into unnecessary conflict, drama, or manipulation. It establishes that your attention and energy are not freely available for exploitation or provocation. This form of quiet boundary setting is subtle, yet profoundly disarming. The person who sought to hurt you may feel frustrated, unsettled, or confused because they cannot predict how you will respond, and they realize that their attempts to provoke are ineffective. Silence thus functions as both a shield and a tool of influence. It protects your inner space while subtly redirecting the energy dynamics of the interaction. Silence can also be used strategically to maintain dignity and self-respect. When someone inflicts pain through insult, betrayal, or criticism, responding impulsively often escalates tension or validates their attempt to destabilize you. By remaining quiet, you preserve your dignity, demonstrating that your sense of self is independent of their behavior. This quiet resilience communicates a subtle but unmistakable message: your emotional equilibrium cannot be bought, coerced, or broken. It establishes an aura of unpredictability. They can never fully anticipate how you will engage, and this uncertainty becomes a source of both confusion and respect. Moreover, silence can create a space for reflection on both sides. While you remain composed and introspective, the other person is left to confront their own words, actions, and motives without the immediate feedback of reaction. This pause can catalyze self-awareness in them, even if indirectly, and often interrupts the cycle of manipulation, aggression, or provocation. The absence of a reaction forces the situation into a subtle but profound stillness, a moment where clarity and power are retained by the one who chooses silence. Ultimately, silence is a tool of empowerment because it allows you to act from a position of calm authority rather than reactive vulnerability. It is not passive or weak, it is deliberate, intentional, and profoundly unsettling to someone who expects to provoke or destabilize you. It disarms without confrontation, confuses without cruelty, and protects without aggression. Through silence, you maintain control over your energy, your presence, and your response, demonstrating a quiet mastery that is far more impactful than words alone. In this way, silence becomes not just a pause, but a powerful strategy, a way to reclaim your power, preserve your integrity, and subtly disorient the person who sought to hurt you. When someone hurts you, unpredictability becomes a powerful tool. Most people who inflict pain or manipulate expect predictable reactions: anger, pleading, defensiveness, or withdrawal. They rely on the patterns of human behavior, anticipating that a reaction will validate their attempt to control or destabilize you. By acting in ways that defy these expectations, you disrupt their assumptions and reclaim authority over the dynamic. Non-predictability is not about playing games or being deceptive for the sake of confusion. It is a conscious strategy that arises from self-possession, awareness, and alignment with your principles. When your actions are guided by thoughtfulness rather than impulse, when you refuse to behave according to the script someone else expects, you create a presence that is simultaneously calm, grounded, and compelling. This unpredictability unsettles those who seek to manipulate because they can no longer anticipate or control your behavior. Non-predictability begins with detachment from expectation. When hurt occurs, the mind often races toward rehearsed responses, whether that's an argument, a rebuttal, or an emotional outburst. These reactions are predictable and therefore susceptible to manipulation. Choosing instead to pause, observe, and respond intentionally breaks that cycle. The key is to act from alignment with your values and self-respect, rather than from the compulsion to react in the ways you or others are accustomed to. For example, when someone tries to provoke guilt, shame, or anger, a predictable response would be defensiveness or apology. A non-predictable response might be calm acknowledgement, silence, or redirecting the conversation toward constructive dialogue. By refusing to follow expected patterns, you maintain authority over your energy and create a subtle, disorienting effect on the person attempting to hurt you. Part of non-predictability is mastering timing. Immediate reactions often reveal vulnerability. They signal that someone else's behavior has succeeded in disturbing your equilibrium. Deliberate pacing, on the other hand, demonstrates control. Responding after a pause, or choosing when and whether to respond at all, conveys that you are not beholden to external provocation. Timing becomes a tool of subtle power, revealing that you operate according to your own rhythm rather than the expectations imposed upon you. This approach is inherently confusing to someone seeking to destabilize you because it interrupts the feedback loop they rely on to measure impact. Instead of gaining a predictable emotional reaction, they encounter measured intentionality, which neutralizes their control. Another facet of non-predictability lies in the use of tone, body language, and demeanor. Calm, composed presence in the face of provocation contradicts the expected escalation. Even small gestures, such as steady eye contact, measured breathing, or a neutral expression, can communicate strength without aggression. These signals disrupt the manipulator's assumptions because they anticipate visible signs of emotional disturbance, tension, defensiveness, or agitation. By maintaining composure, you assert an invisible authority that is both subtle and undeniable. This contrast between their expectation and your response fosters confusion and often forces them to reconsider their approach. Non-predictability is further enhanced by flexibility in response. It does not mean acting erratically or inconsistently. Rather, it means responding according to discernment, context, and principle rather than impulse or habit. A person who is hurt you may anticipate the same defensive tactic every time, but when you act thoughtfully and adaptively, you remain ungraspable. This adaptability communicates that your behavior is guided not by reaction to them, but by conscious choice. They can no longer read you, manipulate you, or predict the trajectory of your actions. Your presence becomes an enigma, not as a weapon, but as an extension of self-possession and deliberate agency. Non-predictability also relies on aligning actions with long-term objectives rather than short-term emotional satisfaction. A predictable reaction may feel cathartic in the moment, but it often leaves you drained or entangled in the very drama you wish to avoid. Acting unpredictably, guided by intentionality and clarity of purpose, preserves your energy and strengthens your position. It transforms situations of potential harm into opportunities to demonstrate composure, strategic awareness, and integrity. The person who attempted to hurt you becomes aware, consciously or unconsciously, that their attempts to destabilize you are ineffective. This recognition, subtle yet powerful, amplifies your authority and self-possession. Ultimately, non-predictability is a manifestation of internal sovereignty. It is the expression of a person who is no longer bound by external expectations, conditioned reactions, or the attempts of others to control their emotional state. By defying predictable patterns, you assert that your behavior is determined by your own values, discernment, and awareness, not by the provocations of someone seeking to hurt you. This unpredictability confounds manipulation, protects your energy, and communicates power without aggression. It transforms vulnerability into strength and response into artful mastery, leaving the person who tried to hurt you both disoriented and unable to reclaim control. In this way, non-predictability is not a tactic of deception, but a reflection of self-possession, deliberate action, and inner authority. When someone hurts you, the ability to detach without creating distance becomes an essential skill. Detachment does not mean coldness, indifference, or emotional abandonment. It is a conscious choice to maintain clarity, sovereignty, and composure while still being present in the interaction. Too often, people respond to hurt by either lashing out or withdrawing entirely, creating extremes that are easy to read and manipulate. Detachment, however, allows you to engage without surrendering control over your emotions, energy, or judgment. You remain connected to yourself, aware of your feelings and boundaries, while not allowing the other person's actions to dictate your internal state. This subtle balancing act is a form of quiet power. It allows you to confuse someone who seeks to destabilize you because they anticipate either reactivity or retreat, and instead they encounter a presence that is calm, self-possessed, and unassailable. Detachment begins with understanding that your emotional well-being is your responsibility alone. When someone hurts you, it is natural to feel a surge of emotional intensity, anger, sadness, or frustration. These responses are valid, yet acting upon them impulsively often hands control to the person who caused the hurt. By practicing detachment, you recognize these emotions without allowing them to control your behavior. This internal separation is not denial, it is mastery. You acknowledge that the situation has affected you, but you refuse to let it consume you or dictate your actions. In this way, detachment becomes a protective boundary, allowing you to remain present without being vulnerable to manipulation or emotional escalation. Another aspect of detachment is maintaining perspective. When someone hurts you, it is easy to magnify the situation, allowing it to define your mood, perception, or self-worth. Detachment requires the conscious act of observing the situation objectively, understanding that the other person's behavior is a reflection of their choices, limitations, or unresolved issues, not a measure of your value. By viewing the hurt from a broader perspective, you prevent it from dominating your mental and emotional landscape. This objectivity allows you to interact with the person without being entangled in the drama they intended to provoke. The clarity that arises from detachment is both stabilizing and disorienting to the person attempting to manipulate or wound you. Detachment without distance also involves clear boundaries. You can be emotionally grounded while maintaining relational or physical proximity without allowing the other person to overstep or exploit your energy. Boundaries are the framework that defines what is acceptable in your interactions and what is not. They communicate self-respect without hostility. By holding firm to these boundaries calmly and consistently, you create an environment where the other person cannot predict or control your response. This unpredictability, combined with your composed presence, subtly confuses them and limits their ability to manipulate you. Detachment allows you to engage on your own terms, maintaining your sovereignty even in the midst of conflict or hurtful behavior. Detachment also facilitates discernment in communication. When you are emotionally entangled, words can be reactive, misaligned with intention, and sometimes damaging. By detaching, you gain the clarity to choose when to speak, what to say, and how to convey it without letting anger or frustration dominate. This conscious choice makes your words far more impactful because they come from a space of deliberation rather than reaction. You speak not to satisfy a fleeting emotional need, but to assert your position, preserve your integrity, and protect your energy. This approach confounds someone who expects predictable, emotionally charged responses, demonstrating that their attempts to provoke or destabilize you have failed. Another profound dimension of detachment is the ability to remain authentic while protecting yourself. You do not feign indifference or construct a false persona. You remain genuinely present, yet emotionally sovereign. This authenticity, combined with measured emotional distance, creates a presence that is both accessible and ungraspable. People who attempt to hurt you are often taken aback because they cannot elicit the reactions they anticipate. They encounter a person who is fully engaged with themselves, aware of the situation, and firmly rooted in their own sense of worth and stability. This subtle power arises from the fact that detachment does not disconnect you from your emotions or values. It allows you to express them deliberately and on your own terms. Finally, detachment without distance nurtures resilience. Life is filled with challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of hurt, and how you respond determines your emotional trajectory. By practicing detachment, you build the capacity to remain centered, to process pain without being consumed by it, and to navigate relationships with clarity and intention. This resilience is a form of unspoken authority. It communicates that no one else has the power to control your emotional state or diminish your sense of self. Detachment, therefore, is not a defensive posture but a proactive strategy. It allows you to engage fully, protect your energy, and maintain composure while subtly confusing anyone who seeks to destabilize you. In essence, detachment without distance is the art of engaging without surrendering, observing without being consumed, and interacting without losing authority over yourself. It creates a dynamic where hurt is acknowledged but not weaponized, presence is maintained without being vulnerable to manipulation, and calm authority disorients those who expect predictable reactions. Through detachment, you assert sovereignty over your emotions, energy, and presence, transforming potential vulnerability into subtle, unshakable power. When someone hurts you, redirecting your energy toward yourself becomes a profound act of empowerment. Often, when pain is inflicted, the natural tendency is to dwell on the event, replay it in your mind, or expend energy attempting to make the other person understand or pay for their actions. This focus, while understandable, keeps your attention and vitality tied to the very source of your hurt. Redirecting your energy toward yourself is not avoidance, it is a conscious reclamation of your power, your time, and your emotional and mental resources. It is the deliberate choice to invest in growth, joy, and purpose rather than letting someone else's behavior dictate your emotional landscape. By doing so, you shift from reaction to creation, from depletion to empowerment, and from being a participant in someone else's narrative to the author of your own life. Redirecting energy to yourself begins with awareness of where your focus lies. Hurt naturally demands attention. It triggers emotions, thoughts, and reflections that can dominate your mind. The first step in reclaiming your energy is to notice this pattern, to observe how much time and vitality you may be spending on someone else's actions, intentions, or perceived shortcomings. Awareness allows you to interrupt the habitual cycle of ruminating over pain. By recognizing that your attention is a finite resource, you can make a deliberate choice to redirect it toward your own well-being, goals, and personal growth. This conscious redirection is both a protective measure and a proactive strategy. It prevents further depletion and channels your energy into something constructive and self-affirming. Investing in yourself requires cultivating practices that strengthen your mind, body, and spirit. Physical movement, creative expression, mindfulness, learning, and pursuing passions all serve to anchor your energy internally rather than externally. When someone has attempted to hurt you, channeling your attention into self-improvement, creativity, or personal fulfillment transforms the energy that might have been consumed by resentment or anger into something productive. This reallocation is subtly disruptive to the person who tried to destabilize you because it demonstrates that their actions no longer hold power over your state of being. They expect preoccupation, distress, or predictable emotional engagement, but they encounter independence and vibrancy instead. Redirecting energy also involves emotional stewardship. Rather than allowing anger, sadness, or frustration to dominate your internal landscape, you consciously choose how much space these emotions occupy. You acknowledge the feelings, but you do not let them dictate your thoughts or actions. This regulation requires intentional focus on what nourishes you emotionally, relationships that uplift, activities that energize, and environments that support growth. By managing your emotional energy carefully, you ensure that your responses are deliberate, your engagement is authentic, and your presence is grounded. This not only preserves your well-being, but also subtly confounds the person who sought to hurt you because they cannot elicit the reaction or emotional dominance they anticipated. Another crucial aspect of redirecting energy to yourself is goal orientation. When hurt has occurred, it is easy to become consumed by the immediate situation or by attempts to repair perceived damage to yourself or your reputation. By turning focus to your personal goals, whether professional, creative, or personal, you reclaim the narrative of your life. Energy spent on planning, learning, creating, or advancing toward aspirations is energy that no one else can control or diminish. This strategic redirection demonstrates that your life and your growth are not contingent on someone else's actions. It also serves as a subtle, almost imperceptible form of power. While they intended to disturb or derail you, your energy and attention remain sovereign and forward-moving. Redirecting energy toward yourself also cultivates resilience. Life inevitably presents challenges, and the ability to reclaim your energy, rather than surrender it to hurt or conflict, strengthens your capacity to navigate adversity. Each time you choose to invest in yourself, rather than in the turmoil caused by others, you reinforce a pattern of self-sufficiency and empowerment. You signal, primarily to yourself, but also subtly to others, that your vitality is yours to govern. This resilience is disarming to someone who expects that their attempt to hurt you will destabilize or control your emotional state. Your continued focus on growth and self-care is a quiet but unmistakable statement of autonomy. Self-reflection is another dimension of energy redirection. Hurt often prompts deep introspection about values, boundaries, and priorities. By turning attention inward, you examine what truly matters, what aligns with your principles, and where your energy is most wisely invested. This inward focus not only enhances self-understanding, but also strengthens decision-making, boundary setting, and emotional intelligence. It converts what could have been a source of depletion into an opportunity for clarity, wisdom, and alignment. Ultimately, redirecting your energy toward yourself transforms hurt into opportunity. It is an act of sovereignty that prioritizes your growth, joy, and purpose over external disturbance. It removes the leverage that the person who hurt you might have sought to gain, leaving them confused because their actions no longer determine your state or trajectory. Your energy becomes a wellspring of empowerment, creativity, and resilience, a force entirely under your control. In this way, redirecting energy to yourself is not just self-care, it is a conscious, deliberate, and profoundly effective response that preserves your autonomy, fortifies your presence, and transforms vulnerability into unshakable strength. When someone hurts you, the instinct is often to react, to engage in the familiar cycles of anger, explanation, or retreat. Yet true power emerges when you choose a different path, one guided by awareness, composure, and deliberate action. By regaining your center, you anchor yourself in calm authority. By responding rather than reacting, you reclaim control over your energy and choices. Through silence, you create a presence that is unshakable and disorienting to those who seek to provoke. With non-predictability, you disrupt expectations and assert your autonomy, Detachment without distance allows you to maintain engagement without surrendering your emotional sovereignty. And by redirecting your energy toward yourself, you transform hurt into growth, focus, and resilience. Together, these principles form a subtle, unassailable power. In mastering them, you do not merely survive pain, you rise above it, confounding those who sought to hurt you while cultivating strength, freedom, and clarity that belong entirely to you.